before the name Vietnam existed, before the first words were carved onto bamboo slips or stone, people were already living on the land shaped like an S. They gathered into communities, relied on one another to survive amid a natural world that was both generous and unforgiving. This was an age when the soil still carried the scent of fresh alluvium, when rivers flowed freely without restraint, when forests were thick and endless, and when human beings had to learn how to live without being swept away by floods, devoured by wild beasts, or torn apart by their own fears. Those earliest communities settled along great rivers, where each flood season brought fertile silt to nourish the fields, yet also threatened to destroy everything if people failed to work together. From the need to survive, they learned how to cultivate wet rice, how to build dikes and dig canals, how to read the skies and listen to the wind. From this, they came to understand a fundamental truth. A single person could not defeat nature, but many people together could endure. Villages were formed, kinship ties grew strong, a shared language emerged, and a vague yet resilient sense of collective identity began to take shape. Over time, scattered tribes gradually linked together, not through conquest, but through shared needs and shared belief. Leadership did not belong merely to the strongest, but to those who were trusted, those who could maintain harmony between heaven, earth, and humankind. Later generations would call these leaders the Hung Kings, 18 successive reigns governing the land of Van Lang. The number 18 may not be a literal count, but rather a symbol of continuity, of an unbroken transmission of responsibility from one generation to the next. In the era of Van Lang, there were no written laws and no complex administrative machinery, yet there existed deeply rooted common rules. People lived by custom, worshipped their ancestors, and believed they were descendants of the Dragon Lord and the Fairy Mother, born from 100 eggs and divided between mountains and sea, yet sharing one origin. This story was not merely a tale for children. It was a way of explaining why differences existed and why, despite them, turning away from one another was never an option. Mountains and water, highlands and lowlands, distance and proximity, all were parts of the same people. During festivals, bronze drums were struck, their echoes carrying across rivers and forests. Engraved upon them were images of dancing figures, flying birds, rowing boats, and radiant suns. These were not just decorations, but visual declarations of a worldview, humans living in harmony with nature, neither separating themselves from heaven and earth, nor surrendering completely to them. This way of life endured for many generations, stable, yet not stagnant. As interactions and conflicts among northern and southern groups increased, the need for a more unified state became clear. In this context, An Duong Vuong emerged, uniting the O-Viet and Lac-Viet peoples to establish the state of O-Lac. The capital was moved to Co Loa, a strategically positioned site on higher ground, suitable for defense. The citadel was built in spiraling layers, reflecting an advanced level of organization and military thinking for its time. O-Lac marked a significant transition, from a loose tribal confederation to a state with a clear sense of territorial defense. The legend of the magical crossbow, though mythical in nature, reflected a deep aspiration to protect the country through ingenuity and technique, not merely through physical strength. In an increasingly volatile world, the ancient Vietnamese understood that survival required becoming stronger than before. Yet, it was also here that tragedy quietly began to unfold. When a country possesses high walls and powerful weapons, complacency can take root. The story of My Cho and Trung Thuy is not simply a sorrowful love tale, but the earliest historical warning of a danger that would recur throughout Vietnamese history: the loss of a nation from within. Misplaced trust, weakened vigilance, and the sacrifice of collective interest for personal affection led to the fall of O-Lac before Trieu Da. When An Duong Vuong retreated toward the sea, when the sacred sword sank beneath the waves, an era came to an end. The country lost its independence, ushering in nearly 1,000 years of northern domination. Yet the era of nation-building did not disappear. It retreated into collective memory, into customs, into the structure of village life, into ancestral worship, and into the belief that the people shared a common origin, even under foreign rule. In the centuries that followed, whenever the Vietnamese rose in rebellion, from the Trung sisters to Li Bi, from Ngo Quyen to Lê Lợi, The spirit of the nation-building era was invoked, often without words. It was the spirit that placed community above the individual, regarded the country as home, and saw ancestors as roots. These values were not forged in grand victories, but in quiet days of labor, in flood seasons when dikes were built together, in long nights by the hearth where stories were passed down to children. The nation-building era, therefore, is not merely the opening chapter of history, but its deepest foundation, upon which all later periods stand. Without understanding this era, it is difficult to understand why the Vietnamese can endure for so long, why they can be gentle yet unyielding, why they can adapt without losing themselves. Looking back, one can see that the Vietnamese were not born to be conquerors, nor to be perpetual subjects. They were born to live together, to guard their land and water, and to preserve what may seem ordinary: rice fields, rivers, homes, and ancestral memory. From these ordinary things a people was formed, growing, stumbling, and rising again across thousands of years. And this is the greatest meaning of the nation-building era. Not its territorial size or military might, but its first answer to a timeless question: who we are and why we must remain together. Conclusion: the era of nation-building ended in loss, but what it created was never lost. It lives in the Vietnamese view of the nation as an extended family, in the enduring reminder to remember the source of the water you drink, and in the instinct to rise when there is no retreat left. No matter how many times history changes course, that foundation remains, quietly supporting an entire people as they move through time.